All right, so when you hear St. Patrick, what comes to mind? Probably shamrocks, big parades, maybe everything turning green for a day, right? Well, the real story of the man behind the holiday, it isn't about a party. It's this incredible, dramatic tale of kidnapping, slavery, and a transformation that literally changed a nation forever. To really get it, we have to go way, way back, long before all the shamrocks.
And we're going to start right here with this pretty shocking quote from Patrick's own writing, which is called his Confession. This is our first clue that the man who would become the patron saint of Ireland, well, he didn't start out as some holy figure. Not even close. His story actually begins with him being completely disconnected from faith.
So yeah, to understand the saint, you first have to meet the sinner. And honestly, his early life gives you absolutely no hint of the wild path he would eventually take.
Patrick was born way back in the late 4th century in Roman Britain, probably in the area we now call Scotland. And here's the kicker. His father was a deacon in the Catholic Church. But Patrick himself, he admitted he had gone away from God and just wouldn't listen to the priests. He was basically a privileged, non-religious teenager living a pretty cushy life. But that comfortable life was about to be completely ripped apart. When he was just 16, something happened that would violently change the course of his entire existence.
He was kidnapped by Irish raiders, and this started the absolute darkest chapter of his life. But it was in that very darkness that he found a kind of light he never expected.
For 6 long years, Patrick was a slave in Ireland. He was forced to work as a shepherd, completely alone. Imagine it. He was cold, he was hungry, and all by himself in a strange land. It was right there, at his absolute lowest point, that he finally started to pray.
And the change in him was just staggering. He wrote that his love and fear of God grew so strong that he was praying constantly, day and night, out in the woods, on the mountains. Didn't matter if it was raining or snowing. His faith wasn't just found. You could say it was forged in fire. And this intense new faith led to a vision. He believed God spoke to him and told him to escape. So he did it. He ran from his captors, made a crazy journey to the coast, and somehow found a ship to take him back home to Britain. He was finally free. Okay, and this is where the story takes its most unbelievable turn. After everything he'd been through, after escaping slavery, Patrick made a choice that is almost impossible to wrap your head around. He decided to go back.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. Why on earth would you ever go back to the country where you were enslaved? To the very people who kidnapped you? For Patrick, the answer came in another really powerful vision. He wrote that he heard the voice of the Irish people calling out to him, begging him to come back. He said this vision touched my heart deeply. For him, this wasn't just a dream. This was a divine mission, a calling that he knew he could not ignore.
I love this comparison because it shows the complete 180 his life took. The first time he went to Ireland, he was a terrified captive, dragged there against his will. The second time, after studying for years to become a priest and then a bishop, he went as a willing missionary with this incredible sense of purpose.
So he goes back to Ireland. But how in the world did he manage to convert a whole nation of druids and chieftains who, were not exactly friendly to his message at first? Well, he did it by making the complicated simple.
So, one of the trickiest ideas in Christianity to explain is the Holy Trinity. This idea that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all somehow one God. It's a really abstract concept. How do you explain that to people who have a totally different set of beliefs? Patrick used something the Irish people saw every single day, a shamrock. He'd show them how its 3 leaves represent the 3 persons of the Trinity, but they're all connected to a single stem, representing the one God. One plant, 3 leaves. It was just a simple, genius visual that made the heart of his faith totally understandable.
And you know what? It worked. This whole method of meeting people where they were at, using symbols they already knew to explain new ideas, was incredibly effective. He converted thousands, from regular folks all the way up to powerful kings, and started building churches all over Ireland.
So his success wasn't just some legend that popped up over time. It was the real result of decades of hard, dedicated work. And that dedication is exactly what built his legacy. For 40 years. Think about that. He dedicated the rest of his entire life to his mission in Ireland. 40 years of traveling, preaching, and putting up with all kinds of hardship. All of it driven by that powerful faith he found when he was just a lonely shepherd boy. This timeline really shows you the whole journey. He got back to Ireland around the year 433 and died on March 17, 461, right at the spot where he had built his very first church. And that date, March 17th, the day he died, that's why we celebrate St. Patrick's Day every single year.
This line from a poem people believe he wrote called The Breastplate just perfectly sums up how complete his faith was. It was this all-in trust in God that let him face anything, that let him dedicate his life to a mission that anyone else would have said was absolutely impossible.
So, the next time you see a shamrock on March 17th, I hope you remember the real story. It's not about a guy who chased snakes out of Ireland. It's about a slave who returned to forgive his captors and whose own personal transformation ended up changing the entire history of a nation. It really makes you wonder, what can one person's faith actually change?